Michael Kaskey-Blomain, 97.3 ESPN.com. He joins us now to take a closer look at this series and back at game number 4 down there in Miami. What's up, MKB?
Mike, how you doing, man?
Everything is well, my man. And, hey, I mean, I don't know that you can really find a way to not say what an impressive victory that was. I mean, the game that they played in Philly, game 2, I had said the next day, look, a team that wants to be realistically a championship team or make it to the finals, they had to find a way to win that game in Philly the other night. They didn't do it, and it was a little upsetting, a little disappointing, but they found a way to win a similar game in Miami, which I think is even more impressive.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I thought what the team showed at both games in Miami really was really impressive and really kind of gives you a little bit more faith in what this team can do, not even in the future, but just this season. It seemed like they really grew up, over those 2 games down in Miami on Thursday and Saturday. The physical play, just the way that the crowd was, behind Miami. Those are tough games to win for any team, let alone obviously a team that's as young and as inexperienced as the Sixers are. And I thought they just, like you said, after that game 2 game in Philly, there was a little bit of a letdown where Miami just really out-physicaled the Sixers, kind of out-hustled them, just out-bodied them. I thought the Sixers responded really well in both games and kind of answered everything Miami had to dish out. And at times, Miami looked like the team that was getting, frazzled and kind of disruptive within themselves. And that's what you would expect, not from a veteran team, but from a young team like the Sixers. So I thought, after seeing what the Sixers were able to do on the road there, I think a lot of people came away a little bit feeling better about what they could even do this year.
Well, and Michael, the big difference between game 2 and game 4 is no Embiid. I mean, and realistically, his impact was felt in game 3 when he scored, the 16-footer, the three-pointer, the 2 free throws. He did it in a variety of ways. But in game 4 on Saturday, his presence was felt on the defense. He took that game over defensively.
Yeah, he did. And you could see, just the type of impact he has, even in a game where he's not necessarily flowing as well as he could be on the offensive end. He was, obviously not making the same shots in game 4 that he made in game 3. Especially from long distance. He was, had trouble holding on to the ball. I think he had, 5 turnovers in the first half alone. He was, it was just not his best offensive performance. But even with that going on, you could not take him off the floor due to how impactful he was for that team on the defensive end. Miami, could not get anything going to the paint. He had, obviously Hassan and Kelly Olynyk were very limited at any time Embiid's in there. And it really just enables everything the Sixers want to do on the offensive end when he's in there on the defensive end, protecting the rim, getting the defensive rebounds, and allowing the team to get out in transition, getting the ball to Ben. He was, I think he really showed his versatility in game 4, aside from what he's able to do on the offensive end.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain with us. Michael, you wrote on our website on 97.3 ESPN.com about Joel Embiid and him being worth the wait. Could you kind of sum up what he means to the franchise and a little bit about his journey to get to where he is now?
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. It's just something, ever since he was drafted back in 2014 in June, he represented for this team the potential of future, deep playoff runs and the chance to be a contender. And, that future is here now. I think a lot of people, the Sixers are now the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference, tied with the Raptors, according to the Vegas Sportsbook. And I think this just happened a lot quicker as far as being a true contender than, people might have thought. And that's so much of that is directly due to Joel and the perseverance that he showed during those, the earlier years. He obviously went through, a lot of struggles overcoming those early injury issues, a lot of, negative outside noise, people saying that he was a bust, that he was, never going to get on the court, that he was better at social media than he was at basketball. There's a lot of negative, noise of circling him those 2 years. And it would have been easy for him, obviously, to, kind of let that get to him. And, I think to an extent it did. He's opened up about how there was a period of time after the second surgery when his brother passed away that he was, really kind of second-guessing his life at the time and thinking that he would have, kind of wanted to go home, put the NBA, the Sixers basketball behind him and just kind of retreat. And, you can't blame a young kid that's out of his home country, far away from his family, to have those feelings. But instead of giving in to them, I think he deserves a ton of credit for, kind of using that doubt. And he still does it now. He uses that doubt to fuel him to work hard and to get into, to become the monster that he is out on the floor today, and to lead the Sixers to 2 straight road games like he did down in Miami. I thought was just a really great way for him to be welcomed to postseason basketball. And, obviously the most exciting thing for Sixers fans is, they have a chance to compete this year and get to the finals. But if they don't, this is just the beginning. Obviously, Joel, Ben, those guys in place, that this is a team that's going to be, ready to compete in the East for years to come.
Now, Michael, you tweeted out to the people who had been calling for Brett Brown's job. What is it about Brown that you have liked the most in this series? And do you think that he's gotten the better of Spoelstra?
It's tough, Pete. And the thing with Brett Brown is that I think a lot of people, don't understand that, have been calling for his job. Nothing about what Brett has done to get the team to where they are now has really changed. He instilled the culture that you're seeing now. You're seeing, national media members really talking about how great the culture is within the Sixers and how they play for each other, and how, it's just a very tight-knit group. And that didn't just happen overnight this year. That's something that Brett has been, instilling in this team since the day he was hired. And he was doing the same thing when he didn't have the same talent that he has now. He was coaching these guys up when he knew they weren't going to be here the next year or even the next week in some cases. He treated, every player that came through the door of the Sixers like they could be, a potential piece of the future. And he put that in place, combined with the style of play that he thought would be beneficial to this team in today's NBA, which is, the pace and the space based off the defense. All of that was put into place years ago, and now we're starting to see it come to fruition because obviously the experience of the players has developed more, the talent on the roster, the team is deeper. Brett doesn't have to give 30 minutes a night to Jared Bayless or TLC. Those minutes are now going to, guys that are just more effective in Ersan or Marco or something like that. So I think that, kind of reaping the spoils now, but this is the culmination of the work that he's put in, over years. So it's nice to see him get some credit. And I don't know if he's necessarily out-coached Spoelstra, because I think, Spoelstra has certainly made some solid adjustments himself, but he's certainly, been at least right on par with Eric Spoelstra, who's one of, obviously the more experienced coaches in the league, for finals appearances, 2 titles. So for it to be Brett's first series in the postseason, to have a 3-1 lead against a veteran team like the Heat, I think he's off to obviously a really great start in his postseason career.
What credit, if any, do you give Brown for putting Justin Anderson on there to get his defensive presence in? And also, how do you think that he's used Markelle Fultz yesterday, DNP-CD, but he's tried to mix him in and out of the lineup?
Yeah, that's a great point, Pete. That's one thing that I think Brett has done well in this series, is kind of make minor personnel adjustments. Obviously, inserting Justin Anderson into the lineup these past 2 games to be a physical defender on Dwayne Wade and provide a little bit more defensive edge to the Sixers was huge. And, as tough as it is, his realization that, Markelle has just not played too well, during games 2 and games 3. And to go away from him in game 4 and go with TJ, that's something that I talked about a little bit. Markelle, I'm still very high on, where he will be, his future with the Sixers and what he could bring to the team moving forward. But in this series in particular, which has been, a very physical, tough series, one that, even Ben Simmons, who's clearly an athletic freak of nature, has struggled with. It's no surprise that Markelle has struggled. It's a guy with 19-year-old with less than 20 games of NBA experience, thrown basically right into the fire of a very tough physical Eastern Conference playoff series. So it's not necessarily even a slight on him that he's, kind of out of the rotation, but I think Brett just deserves some credit for, noticing that Markelle was struggling those first 2 games. Markelle was a -9 in 4 minutes and 20 seconds of action in game 3. He was the only Sixer with a negative plus-minus on the day. So I think it's tough to do, but he assessed that situation, went to TJ. Same with Justin. So I think the personnel adjustments he's made this series have definitely contributed to, the 3-1 lead that the team has now.
Talk with Michael Kaskey-Blomain. Follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. He covers the Sixers for 97.3 ESPN.com. Mike, what do you look at 27 turnovers? Is this just because sloppy play, careless with the ball? What do you attribute the 27 turnovers for in that game on Saturday? And is that concerning, or is that just kind of an anomaly of a game, the style of the game? When you watch that game, what do you make of the 27 turnovers? Because that number is astronomical, and for them to win is even probably more mind-blowing.
Yeah, that is astronomical, and then that's not a situation that you're going to get a lot of playoff W's, in a game where you turn the ball over 27 times. Brett said that after the game that he was, very surprised that they were even able to pull it out, turning the ball over that much. But, I'm hoping it's just an anomaly. That was obviously, turnovers were something that plagued the team throughout the season for, a good part of the season, but they had really kind of turned the corner on that, since March and April. They had, been taking much better care of the ball. I think they dropped from dead last in the league to 19th or 20th in turnovers per game, which, is a pretty big step mid-season. And, I think that last game kind of might have just been a relapse in a bit of a combination. It looked like they just made some poor plays, and combined with Miami's tough defense, it just kind of got out of control. Ben and Joel were a couple of the biggest culprits. But, when that's happened in the past, especially Ben, he's been able to kind of address that and bring it down. I'm sure that's something Brett will, really preach on in between Game 4 and Game 5 tomorrow night. So I don't expect it to be another, 27 turnover performance. But at the same time, with the style of play that they play, the pace, the emphasis on passing the ball, the turnovers are going to happen. And Brett's been, pretty clear that he's okay with that within the flow of the game, but it's just obviously not to the extent of 27. I think if you can, if they can get it down to 18, 19, that would be, it's still a lot, but I think that's a situation where Brett would feel at least a little bit better.
Mike, they had 24 through 3. They cut it down, which is interesting because it was a problem for them in the regular season in fourth quarters. They would blow a lot of fourth quarter leads. They were sloppy in fourth quarters. They have seemingly, I don't want to say fixed it completely, but they have dominated the fourth quarter in the series. And in this game, they went from 24 turnovers through 3 quarters. They only turned the ball over 3 times in that fourth quarter. I mean, something has changed from this team in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, Mike, and I think it's really just experience, but that's a great point. They did almost a complete 180 where, during the regular season, you were watching this team and they could have a double-digit lead going into the fourth quarter, and you're sitting there worried, all right, are they going to blow this lead? And now it's almost the exact opposite over the past couple of games where, I'm watching this game and they're losing on the scoreboard going into the fourth quarter by a substantial amount, but I'm feeling confident in the team that they're going to pull it out. And I think that that's really just, probably the result of the experience. The first half of the season, so much relied on Ben Simmons, who was literally, never played point guard on the professional level before, to run a high-level offense. And some of the other guys, I think now it's just they've become more comfortable playing with each other. Obviously, Marco and Irsan and those guys have played, they've gotten some experience with each other under their belt. And then the younger guys, Ben, obviously, Joel has gotten better, barring Saturday's game. I think they just kind of morphed as a unit into, a more tight-knit group, which has led to less turnovers and better play down the stretch.
You think Miami has one more game left in them, one more push, one more ounce of energy, because they look like a shot fighter right now. They're giving you, they're scratching and clawing and clutching and grabbing, but I don't know that, do they have anything left in the gas tank?
I don't think so, Mike. I think if they did, I think they gave Philly their best shot in Game 4. And, they, despite the 26 turnovers and everything else, the Sixers came out on top of that game. And, that's what I was thinking to myself after that game. I thought we took really Miami's 2 best shots in Games 3 and 4 in Miami. We absorbed it. It was tough. Obviously, both games are really hard fought, but they came out on top. And, after that, the Sixers are clearly a better team. They're a more talented team. They're a deeper team. Miami really has relied on trying to control the pace while slowing the game down, getting the fouls, and just trying to, out-physical the young Sixers. And it worked to an extent it did work in Game 2. It worked to an extent in Games 3 and 4, but not to the full extent. And I think at this point they really have nowhere else to turn. It's back in Philly. I think the Sixers are really, rightfully so, feeling confident in themselves. I'd be pretty surprised if this series went back to Miami for a Game 6.
Well, Michael, what does concern you about Miami tomorrow night? Is there one more card that Spoelstra can play if they do have one more push in them?
Really, Pete, the only thing that concerns me would just be a team that has their back against the wall with nothing to lose and would just go take it to another level of physicality. Getting the Justice Winslow, Kelly Olynyk, Josh Richardson, getting those guys to just really, not play dirty, I don't want to say, but to just really muck the game up kind of like they did in Game 2 and just be really physical. That's really the best shot that they've had in the series. There's no other, there's no players they could turn to. Deion Waiters isn't making a surprise return to the lineup. There's really nothing else they could do barring, another turn back the clock performance from Dwayne Wade, but I think Brett has done a pretty good job of, changing the coverage on him since that Game 2 explosion and really limiting his looks. So, Pete, I think that really all they could do is just try to muck the game up again, and the Sixers have already showed that they can, overcome that. So I think that Miami's pretty well cooked at this point.
Yeah, there's just a couple of things in this series, late in a game. Would you like to see Brown maybe turn to Justin Anderson to defend? Late in that game, you got Bellinelli on the floor and Redick. I mean, average defenders, not great. And late in that game, I was thinking that, hey, maybe, Justin Anderson should be on the floor and maybe he should do a little bit more offense, defense. Is that nitpicking, or are you watching the game saying the same thing?
It's nitpicking, Mike, but I did think the same thing at times. Obviously when a team's up 3-1, you're still looking. Obviously, you have to look for improvements. I do think that there was a few times where the defensive rotation that Brown had out on the floor, namely what you said when he would roll out Marco and JJ at the same time, or going back to Game 2 or Game 3 where he would do. I think there was a time where he had Markel, Marco, and JJ out there, and rotations like that just they don't work in the postseason well. Justin Anderson, I think, has showed that he's done a pretty good job on Wade or on Wayne Ellington when he's had to. So, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of Justin Anderson, but at the same time, you can't really, argue with the results of the past two games. So I guess you could say it's nitpicking to an extent.
Yeah, and one thing is for sure, this team is living and dying with their stars. I mean, Ben Simmons, triple-double. Joel, even though he didn't have a great game, he ended up with 14 points. But the defense
and 12 rebounds. He still had a double-double.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. Their stars made their presence felt.
It was the 5 blocks.
Yeah, the 5 blocks were unbelievable. But you're right. The defense was the force, but the stars made their presence felt in that game. And guess what, Michael? We all know this. In the NBA, that's how you win. Your stars carry you to these series victories.
You just took the words out of my mouth, Mike. That is how you win in playoff basketball. You don't do it alone. You need guys to step up, and that's exactly what they've gotten from Marco. You got huge plays from Ersan down the stretch in Game 5. Taking a charge, getting a putback, hitting a three, and that's the recipe for a championship team. You have a couple stars that you rely on for the bulk of your production, and you could lean on down the stretch too. And it's important too. Both of those guys, obviously Ben, but Joel too. They look to make the right play. You hear this about LeBron James a lot in the clutch. He's one of the most clutch players, but it's not that he's always looking to score for himself. He's looking to make the play for his team. And obviously Ben has that same, and Joel does too. He has, he can pass out of a double team. He looks to move the ball. He's not, sometimes he gets tunnel vision. I won't say that he won't, but in general, both of those guys look to make the right play. And then you get that combined with other guys stepping up on a nightly basis. Dario obviously has been huge throughout the series, and the other guys we mentioned, and that's really the recipe for a championship team. The only thing that the Sixers don't have at this point is experience in the playoffs, and they're gaining it game by game.
And what's interesting, they almost got the perfect opponent to gain playoff experience on the fly.
Yeah.
It's like this is a team that's not talented enough to beat you, but can almost prepare you for the next round all in one shot.
Yeah, Mike, this seems like a grow-up series for the Sixers. Like, there wasn't, like you said, it almost is a perfect team. It's a veteran team that plays hard. It's classic, like, Eastern Conference basketball. There's nothing easy, and that's the exact type of series that, you grow up in. And I think you see these guys. Ben, he had his struggles in Game 2, and you look at the difference. He bounced back, ready for the physical play in Game 3 and 4 in Miami. And he just put on a show. So
and because of it, that's why this team concerned me a little bit, is because they had the playoff fight, the way that the style would be. And if the Sixers weren't ready to kind of grow up, like you just mentioned, this was the kind of team that could have caught them by slopping the game up. That's why they concerned me a little bit. But it's also, on the flip side, a team that, because the Sixers are prepared for it, Miami's just not talented enough to knock them off. That's why they worried me, yet it's almost the perfect opponent all in one.
Right, that's a great point. I mean, when we were looking before the playoffs, it was between the Bucks and the Heat, you're looking like, all right, well, the Bucks are a more talented team, but the Heat are a better coached, more veteran team that will probably give this team a harder fight for the series, which is exactly what happened. And I wouldn't have been shocked had this series gone, which it still might, gone 6 or 7 games, but I think like you said, the fact that the Sixers just showed that they were able to kind of withstand this physical play from Miami really sets up, good experience for this team moving forward in this postseason.
So, Michael, as you watch the NBA playoffs, a little two-parter here. Who worries you in the East? And we'll start with, if the Sixers close things out, who would you rather see, Boston or Milwaukee?
That's a great question, Pete, and it's one that I was talking about with one of my friends yesterday because it's an interesting question. You have Milwaukee, who I think, when you account for all the injuries that Boston's dealing with, you have a Bucks team that's clearly more talented in terms of the talent and the depth that they're able to put on the floor. But you have a Boston team that's, certainly more better coached with more playoff experience through the coach. So, you look at it that way. Personally, I think that the Celtics would be a better matchup for the Sixers. And it really just comes down to, I don't think that the Celtics would be able to keep pace with the Sixers offensively, missing the guys that they're missing. Obviously the Celtics have a great defense, and they would certainly make it difficult for the Sixers to score. But you just look at the Sixers' offensive production, in this series. They put up 130, 128, 106. And the Celtics, without Kyrie, without Gordon Hayward, obviously, without, some of their key contributors out there, I think they just really struggle to score upwards of 90, 100 points sometimes. And if you get them in a 7-game series with the Sixers, who are deeper than the depleted Celtics, I just think that I just don't think that they'd be able to keep pace with them over the course of 7 games. But the team that worries me the most in the East, I think, is the Raptors at this point. That's a team that's pretty well rounded and also pretty deep, like the Sixers are, and they have that experience. They've been in the playoffs, they've been fighting for it. So I think if it came down to the Sixers and the Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals, that would really be it would be a battle for sure.
All right, here's the big question, MKB. Thompson is 0-5. 3 Flyers losses, the only Phillies home loss, and he lost game 2. Should we allow Thompson to come to the game tomorrow night?
I don't know, Mike. It sounds like Pete might be better served staying in the studio. What do you think?
PT the Bush. They're calling me.
Bush.
Michael, they're calling me the Bush.
MKB, you feeling a closeout tomorrow night, or are we going back to Miami?
Yeah, Mike, I'm feeling a closeout. I would be really surprised if the Sixers, didn't close this out. Like I said, I would not have been surprised had the Heat pulled one of the 2 games out in Miami. But after the Sixers closed it out and come back to Philly with the momentum, I think they wrap it up tomorrow night.
At the Real Mike KB on Twitter. Follow him for all his Sixers coverage tomorrow night. Game 5 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, fellas. Great talking to you.